Hi, welcome to the first episode of something we're trying out for the first time. We're going to call it Full Speed Ahead. It's the podcast where we break down what's going on in the running scene. Today we're covering what's happening in the NCAAs with entries for nationals. My name is Alex Fox.
I'm Caleb Gatchell.
And I'm Garrett Zatlin.
All right, we nailed that first try.
Yes.
So obviously the big news out of the entries is Edward Cheserek is going for the famed Lally triple, where he's entered in the mile, the 3K. When Lally Lalang tried it, he did not win the mile, he did not win the 5K, and he did not even toe the line for the 3K. It is a enormous task to take on, and we saw him run 3:52. There was some rumblings, could he do it? One of those people, saying he's going to do it was you, Caleb. Can you tell me how you think he'll fare doing this?
Sure. I mean, it's one of those things that feels a little bit like when someone calls you Einstein. You're an idiot, actually. We're calling him the Lally Lalang triple, even though Lally bombs trying it. But I actually really like Cheserek's chances. Unlike Lally, I think he's got top-end closing speed. Lally was fast in the mile, sure, but he wasn't quick at the end of a race. Cheserek's quick at the end of a race, so he can take a sit and kick race, and he can win that. Lally needed to make things a little faster. I think that kind of caught up to him by the time you got to the mile 3K. And even with the 5K, I think that's why he lost, was he didn't have that elite closing speed. Cheserek has that. And then also look back at last year. Let's remember what Cheserek did then. Won the 5K, 20 minutes rest, goes out, anchors a DMR, and runs the legs off Isaiah Yorks, who with 3:53 miler, the guy's no joke, and then comes back and dominated the 3K. I mean, no one was close to him, really. So I think this year the only thing you change is you add that mile prelim. I don't think that's really going to phase Ches. He's going to jog a mile, come back, hit a 5K, and then get big rest before the mile final. He's got a whole day, and then that 3K, I think he's going to be fine. I think he's actually going to win all three. I think the bigger question is, can Oregon find anyone else to score points?
Yeah, the DMR is sort of in flux right now. We'll get to that later. Garrett, you were saying there's no way he does the mile. There's no way he even does the DMR. Can he handle this 4-race weekend?
So he's certainly not going 4 races, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But the reason I said he wasn't going to go for the triple is because, of course, the history we saw with Lally Lalang, and then, of course, what we saw last year where he did that amazing triple and then had some an iffy outdoor season. Whether that was a result of that triple indoors or not, we don't really know. But here's how I see it. I see that he goes to the mile prelim, cruises through, he's set to go there. 5K, cruise in, wins that however he needs to. He goes to the mile. He'll be tired, but I still think he wins that. It's the 3K that gets interesting, and it comes down to a strategy that I think we consistently always talk about. Oh, it's going to come down to this. Is someone going to take the pace out hard? And it always going to come down to that. At that point, Cheserek it'll be his fourth actual race. He's going to be tired. Jacob Thompson, the mile is going to push him. Colby Gilbert in the 5K, he's got the 5K stacked. So coming back for that 3K, it'll be interesting. The reason I say he doesn't do the DMR is because that's the fifth race. That'd be the fifth race. He's human, right? We saw that he's at least somewhat human during cross country. I just don't see it. I think that there's enough Oregon depth where they maybe could squeak out All-American if maybe Maton's also doing the mile 3K. That's, again, different story. But Cheserek, if someone takes it out fast enough from that 3K and the race is fast enough, I don't think Cheserek wins.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think he does win the mile. He obviously gets through prelims, no question. And I think Thompson can give him a run for his money in the mile finals, but I don't see it happening for Thompson in the upset. And then with the 5K, we saw Tommy Curtin try to, run fast inside and try to beat him that way, and it just didn't pan out for him. So, even if he runs, 13:40, which is, it's a fast time inside, it's Ches. I think, we're looking at a guy who could realistically run 13:10 inside. So that 13:40 isn't going to take a ton out of his legs. But that 3K, there's a lot of names, and one of them is going to be fresh, and that's Justin Knight, and he does have that elusive Ches scalp.
That's a good
So,
point. That's a good
I
point.
think the 3K, it's if it's going to be any race, it's going to be the 3K. I agree that like there's no chance he can do the DMR. It's just like it's not humanly possible. And what you said, after he did that heroic triple last year with the DMR, I do think he was a bit, gassed to begin outdoor season. That's why, Coach Powell came out and said he looks gassed. But I mean, it didn't really affect him come nationals. So I think that's why they're ultimately able to say, yeah, go for the Lally triple. And it's a fair point that, Lawi Lalang didn't have that closing speed like Ches does, where he can just run away from a guy no matter who it is in the last 200 meters. But I also think this is pretty stiff competition. Mark Scott can close really fast. I really like Justin Knight. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see. I do think he runs all the races. I think he's better than
I agree. I
Lally.
think he runs them all too. I don't think there's any doubt. Yeah, I'd hope so, barring any injury. But we'll see what happens. I'm not as high on Justin Knight this season right now, but I think the 3K could be pretty open. So we'll see. We'll see.
Caleb, if he loses any event, will it be the 3K?
No, it would be the 5K. I know you guys really like that 3K field. Other than Justin Knight, I don't see the credentials there. Like Colby Gilbert's good. He's not Chesrick good. He's not been on that level at nationals before. Mark Scott coming off the 5K, he's never doubled at NCAAs, let alone even been All-American indoors. So I think him doubling is going to be rough when it gets to the 3K. And then after that, you'll have like Clayton Young, Morgan McDonald. None of these guys really have that track record to make me think they can take him down. Now the 5K, I do think Mark Scott's a legitimate threat. I think we've seen him close races. Wisconsin Invited Cross, unbelievably quick. He closed the 3K at Iowa State earlier this year really, really well. I mean, you could argue Justin Knight was letting up more than Scott was closing really fast, but he's known for elite speed. So I think if there's any race where Cheswick gets caught, it's actually that 5K with Mark Scott, who's already run 13:38. He hasn't lost a single race indoors this year. I think fresh in that 5K, he's a legitimate threat, but I don't see it in the 3K.
Yeah. I think some interesting names to watch in the 5K as well are Tyler Day and Matt Baxter. Matt Baxter is sort of like an X factor because we don't really see him racing a lot, but we know he's super talented from cross country, and having a teammate I think can be a big advantage. You brought up a lot of the guys doubling, and I'd like to talk about that a little more. Obviously, we talked about Matons doubling, maybe tripling in the DMR. We have Ben Sorrell doing mile 3K. Eric Peterson is somebody we all like. He's doing 3K, 5K. John Dressel. You talked about Colby Gilbert. You talked about Mark Scott. Just talk to me about why this may or may not be a good or bad decision for some of these guys racing.
I guess I'll just start off with that. So I think when we just go down through this list, guys who I think are safe doubles, I think Gilbert's a safe double, Peterson's a safe double. I like all of those guys I like those two to be All-Americans at both events. Mark Scott, Caleb brings up a really good point. I probably would have put him in there with Peterson and Gilbert, but he just made a good point. He's never been an All-American indoors, and now he has to double. We'll see how that goes. So if things don't go right in the 5K, then we'll see how the 3K goes. So I think Mark Scott's going to walk away with at least one All-American honors, but we'll see there. Dressel, he's getting hot at the right time. Again, I think he's kind of like Scott, where he's going to All-American, and at least one of them, I think, is going to be the 5K. And then Maton's really interesting decision, because not only does he have the mile 3K, but there's the very real possibility that he goes DMR. And the Oregon really needs these points, since the team title's not out of their reach. So I think the biggest thing that we got to look at is Maton. And is Maton really going to be able to go out there? How he's going to have to gauge his efforts? He's going to be tired. So we'll see. The mile final and the 3K final are all after he has to race the mile prelim and the DMR. So it's all very dependent on there. I guess we'll see. And I think for Sorrell, I think it's a gamble. It's a gamble. If things don't work out in the mile, then I think he's going to be in trouble with that 3K, and he'll be gassed. Is my thought. But if it all works out, we'll see. Hopefully, all these guys walk away All-American. I'm not. I think they should, but we'll see. So.
Now, Caleb, I'm going to defer to you because I'm going to consider you our in-house rules expert. Oregon qualified with Matt Maton and Edward Cheserek. That means at least one of them has to be on the DMR team, right?
As far as I know, yes. Yeah.
Okay, so what do you think about?
That's it.
So what do you think about these guys doubling and presumably Matt Maton on the triple with the DMR?
I'm gonna go out on a limb. I think we'll see only 14 guys start the 3K. And I think Maton only starts it if Oregon's still in the running or if he doesn't make the mile final. Same thing with Sorrell. I don't see Sorrell starting the 3K unless he misses the mile final. Like, I think for some of these guys, you're looking at, day one, you've got mile prelims. If you don't make it through, run the 3K day two because you'll be fresh, or relatively fresh. You want to run the mile final. So I think for some of these guys, at least, it's a backup plan. Maton, I think it's a desperate attempt at points if they're still in the running. Because, I was looking, Oregon typically overperforms at NCAAs. Florida has an unfortunate history of underperforming to a certain extent. So I think they're counting on that a little bit. But by the 3K, they're going to have a really good idea if they're still in the running or not. And, I highly doubt someone like Andy Powell is going to jeopardize outdoor seasons when the indoor title's out of reach. He's someone who seemed very focused on a process and viewing indoor transitioning into outdoor and keeping that training cycle going. So I think Maton is a desperate attempt at points if they're in it, but otherwise I don't see him actually doing that triple.
Yeah, that's a big risk because, if he does go for it and let's say he runs that mile final with the 3K in the back of his head, it's a big, big risk. And then you have him on the DMR too. I trust Andy Powell because he's won a lot of indoor titles, but they're asking a lot out of a young kid. It's just his second indoor track season in college. For me, I'm very upset with Ben Sorrell in the mile. I don't think he's a legitimate shot to win. I don't think he can close with Edward Cheserek. Even if Ches isn't in the race, I don't think he can close with Josh Thompson. I don't think he's that sort of speedster. And I really like the idea of having a lot of Buffalo in that 3K. Like I said, I like the team mentality in those finals. Joe Klecker is going to be fresh, because he scratched the mile, one of the only scratches we saw this year on the men's side, which I really like because he's a really strong runner. And then, we have Dressel in the 5K, which I understand because he should be in that All-American conversation. So I like Ben Sorrell a lot, and obviously it's hard for me to question the tactics of, Mark Wetmore. But I really think the Buffalo had something special in that 3K, which we'll talk about a little later. But for the rest of the guys, I really thought Mark Scott and Colby Gilbert would go all in on 3K to see them, really push it. Last year, Garrett, you mentioned, or maybe it was Caleb, Ches was able to dominate that race, but he dominated it in 8 flat. For some reason, Sean McGorty and Justin Knight did not want to race him, even though I thought they had better legs than he did. But, I guess we'll see. And, let's keep on the topic of Maton. So we think that he's going to be – we'll stick on Maton with the DMR. We think he's going to be the mile, presumably, maybe the 1,200, and we see Gorman on the mile. Even without Ches, they do have a strong 800. They do have a really, really good 400 runner. Can they still be in the mix for this title if everything goes right? And, I've been really critical of Sean Tobin, but then Ole Miss ran this converted 926, which is really fast. Is that legit? Are they going to win? Garrett, I know you have similar concerns with Tobin. Talk to me about the DMR field.
Yeah, and the DMR field's so interesting this year. Tobin is really talented. He's definitely one of the more consistent milers out there. I don't think there's any question about it. But when it comes down to, the elite anchors of Josh Thompson and and let's say Edward Cheserek, or he's not going to be, so we'll go with Matthew Maton. Let's say Matthew Maton's on there. Other names that I'm just completely not thinking of right now. Yeah, I just don't see him being able to close with some of these guys. I think he's very talented, but I don't know how I feel about Tobin on the anchor there. In terms of who runs for Oregon, I've already said it. There's no way on earth Ches runs the mile anchor there. What I see is Gorman going the 1200, either Austin Tamago or Mick Stanzovic, the going in that 800, and then the mile would end up being Maton is probably what's going to happen as they try to fight for points there. But really interesting stuff. Also got to point out Indiana, really young squad there with Kyle Mao on the mile. He's really underrated, but also really young. And then I'm also looking at Oklahoma State because I just have so much faith in Josh Thompson there. So Ole Miss, I just don't see Tobin as someone that could win a title yet. But by yet, I mean, I guess I'll have to wait till next season. So, yeah, we'll see.
I think it's sort of now or never for Sean Tobin. I believe he's
right. No, he's a senior, so I guess next season it's like, hey, maybe he could be All-American, but I just need to see a little bit more, and I don't think I've quite seen that this season. So, sorry, Sean Tobin. I'm gonna keep him just outside of the top two. I'm not saying third's impossible. I think third's pretty realistic, but I'm not gonna give him top two.
Now, Caleb, you're a DMR expert yourself. You've been there at Nationals. D2, not quite D1, but not a knock. What do you think happens? You know how it sort of plays out. Can Tobin take home a victory?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the DMR anchors, and I'll be honest, other than Josh Thompson, no one jumps out at me. Like, I know Tobin's had some issues. Maybe it hasn't been the most consistent guy, but you're looking at Kyle Ma, Jack Keelan, Jack Bruce, Josh Kerr, Logan Wetzel, Derek Wiebke, Jonah Koech, Vincent Ciade, and Scott Carpenter as your other anchors. Like, none of those guys scare me any more than Sean Tobin would if I was racing against them. So I really like this Ole Miss team. I think Manahan and Engels give them a huge leg up just in terms of experience and also being able to handle those early legs. You'll never win a DMR on the 1200, but it's really easy to lose a DMR on the 1200. So I like this. I like the experience they have up front with Manahan leading off. I like the talent with Craig Engels in the middle on that 800 leg. That being said, I really, really like Josh Thompson. And if Oklahoma State is anywhere near him, I'd take Josh Thompson over Tobin. But I think Ole Miss is good for second. And the caveat I throw in there is I don't trust the front end of Oklahoma State's relay as much as I trust the front end of Ole Miss's. I think Craig Nowak's absolutely very talented, but he's a longer distance guy at heart, even with that sub 4 mile. And then Brandon Singleton, Bradley Johnson, not two guys with a ton of nationals experience. So I think that potentially puts Oklahoma State in trouble if they're too far back in the pack. Josh Thompson could have a whole lot more work than he can handle. And maybe they never even get up to that front pack if things play out right and Ole Miss walks away with a win. So I would not count them out just yet.
Yeah, I think it's really gonna, sort of depend on how the race plays out. Robert Dominic, I believe, is on the 1200, which is it really speaks to the depth in these middle distance runners that Ole Miss has, where Ryan Manahan, who is a 147 and 358 runner, is on the 400, if on that team at all, because you have Engels and you have Tobin on the mile. And, I think if Ole Miss is going to win this race, they're going to have to hand off in first every single time. Because I want Dominic at the front. 400 is the 400. I want Engels handing off to Tobin in first. And I want Engels to I want Tobin to just run. I don't want him close to Josh Thompson in that last 600. That said, if it does come down to like that last stretch, obviously I like Josh Thompson, but you mentioned Josh Kerr. Like New Mexico is sort of a scary team in a tactical race. Josh Kerr is really, really good. I like Logan Wetzel a lot for Villanova. I'm not sure how much I trust that team. And, Logan Wetzel, I think, redshirted last year, so he's still a freshman, and I don't think he's broken 4, but he does have a lot of really good 800 speed from high school, but we're in college now. But I really, really do like New Mexico in a tactical race. I hope it's not a tactical race because Ole Miss is so loaded in those middle stages and at the 12. Guess we'll see. And while we're talking about these middle distance guys from Ole Miss, we should probably talk about the 800 because you have Angles and Manahan, who are surprisingly the last two in. And it's an interesting field. I think a lot of us really liked Isaiah Harris coming off of last year with U.S. Outdoors at the Olympic Trials. He had a really strong showing, and as did Angles. But this indoor season, we've seen some really, really fast runs, not named Isaiah Harris or Craig Angles. So who's the favorite in that race, and by how much? How up in the air is this, Caleb?
Oh, man. I don't want to pick anyone in that 800 because there's too many guys that I really want to pick. It's not a matter of not trusting guys. It's the talent there is unreal this year. Emmanuel Carrier, freshman from UTEP, had the 600-meter world record for a little while before that was taken away, but has just been on fire indoors. And that 146.15, the way he ran that race was ridiculous. I mean, his closing speed is unreal. So if the race at NCAAs is out in any type of tactical manner, I'd love what he could do. I also really like Daniel Kuhn from Indiana. I think he's been on fire this indoor season. He's been running really, really well. 146.4 is no joke. And then, Virginia Tech had two guys really break out this past weekend. Drew Piazza, maybe not so much of a surprise, a transfer there.
Unfortunately, I'm sorry. They will not be running on the DMR update. Just wanted to throw that out there in case that plays into any analysis there. So just want to throw that out there.
Oh, really?
Yes, they will not be there.
Good to know. So they'll be fresh.
Yes.
Ooh, that makes things really interesting. Fresh is good. And I think Isaiah Harris has been really solid again indoors, coming off a great outdoor season. It's a loaded field. If I had my gut pick, honestly, is Daniel Kuhn. I can't give you a really, really good reason other than just I like the way he's been running this year. He's consistently at the front of races. I think that's important, especially in an 800 indoors. If you're trying to come back from 4th or 5th on a 200-meter track, it's just too hard. There's too much traffic to navigate. You're putting yourself in too much trouble. So I like Daniel Kuhn a lot. One other name I completely forgot about, Iliad Rudo, was runner-up last year. Looked like he had it won until Clayton Murphy stole it in the latter stages. Don't count him out either. But if you're going to put a gun to my head and make me pick, I'm going with Daniel Kuhn.
Man, I miss the days of Edward Kemboy. Edward Kemboy, he's going to win. Garrett, we talked about the two Virginia Tech guys in the race, so you've got some horses in the stall, I guess. Mm-hmm. What do you think about this race?
Man, I love that it's so up in the air that we have no idea who it's going to be. The fact that it could be, any one of, I think, the top, 6 guys realistically. Or I'm going to go with, top 6, because in the top 7 would be Isaiah Harris. Isaiah Harris currently 7th. I don't see him as a possible title contender this year, and I'll tell you why. It's because when you look at all of the guys that he's faced, all the meets he's been in, he's run fast. He's run 146. That definitely can't take that away from him. But when we look at the guys he's faced, when we're talking about like the elite competition, the biggest name he's taken down this season is Stramar Livingston, who, to his credit, is very, very talented. But who else did he really beat? I don't really know. We went to the 1K at the beginning of the season, lost to Joe White. And besides that, won a few other races, but they weren't really all that impressive. I really like Joe White because although he hasn't raced a lot this season, he has shown incredible strength, the ability to close, the ability to stick with a fast pace, has taken down multiple big-time elite names. He's defeated Iliad Ruto. He defeated Blair Henderson. He defeated a lot of, I think of all the guys in his heat of the Iowa State Classic, they're pretty much coming back to nationals, and he's beaten them. So really like Joe White. Right now, at this very moment, he's my favorite to win. Others I'm looking at, I'm gonna. I can't take away Daniel Kuhn. I think Daniel Kuhn has to be in that. I think Drew Piazza also has to be in there. Patty Josephs. He's someone that gets hot in the postseason. So I do have my Virginia Tech bias. So, but right now I have to go with Joseph White because he's just shown me, despite not racing a lot, that he's a winner and he's proven to run fast and beat big names.
Yeah, this is like a really, really deep field, and I think a lot of it's going to come down to the heats, like who's in what heat to see who actually gets through to the final because it's not safe, it's not impractical to say that nobody is safe getting to the final for sure just because there's so much talent. Caleb, you brought up that race with Courier and how he ran 146, and that's just an outstanding point. To anybody listening who hasn't watched that race, I really, really want you to go watch it because it's because they're running 146, and it's like he's running the first 600 casually. He's just so easy with it, and then he just takes off from his teammate who also ran really, really fast. And it just looked effortless, and I've never seen a 146 inside at the collegiate level. I think that really just screams talent. But other guys that we didn't talk about, Rob Heppenstall is the most clutch runner in the postseason. Every year, he just sort of comes out of nowhere at Nationals as an All-American. I don't think he's going to win, but I think top 4 is, where he could be given just how clutch he is. And then it's a bit of a risk for me. I really liked him last year, and he had a bit of a letdown, but he has been running phenomenally this year.
Don't say
really
it.
have to say.
Don't say it.
Beating. Yeah, I was gonna say Andres Arroyo is almost a shoo-in to not make the final. But I'm gonna go with an upset pick, and I'm gonna stick to my guns. I've been saying this for a long, long time. I guess since the summer. I think Craig Engels wins this race. Yeah. We saw Clayton Murphy break out at U.S. championships, come back during track, won the 800 indoor, won the 1500 outside. I think Craig Engels does the same thing to the point where he wins the 800 and he will win the 1500 outside. What's more is he'll get a DMR title in the process. So I'm really, really big. I would like to see Manahan get an All-American nod just because I like Manahan a lot too. But like you said, with all these names, with the Piazza, with Patrick Joseph, with Daniel Kuhn, this is just a really tough field to pick. Plus, you got a guy named Carter Lilly. This is a fantastic name.
Great name.
Yeah. Now, I know you're on Engels right now. But how much are you worried about the fact that he missed a little bit of training early in the year at that broken clavicle, and then he's racing in such a deep field and coming back from the DMR? That doesn't scare you at all?
It does. But like I said, I'm watching him do what he did at the Olympic trials. It's just this guy has got it. He's got that it factor, and we saw it with Clayton Murphy. He had that it factor where he's always going to be in the race, and he knows how to win. He wasn't winning at Olympic trials, but to finish 4th in that 1500 field, it's wow. So I really like his knowledge of racing. I think that's what he has that some of these other guys don't. That, X factor, the know how to win. And that's what I think Clayton Murphy did better than anything. Yeah, he was uber talented, but even at the Olympic level, he just knew how to put himself in the right position and go at the right time. And that's really, really tough to have at the collegiate level. That's something that almost only pros have. And it's a tough pick, and I could very well be wrong. There's a very good chance that he does not get out of the prelims just because, he's the last guy in, I think, with time. But I'm sticking to my guns. I said once after Olympic trials, this guy is going to break out like Clayton Murphy did, and I really believe that he will. That injury could come back to haunt him.
Real quick, before if anyone else says anything, when we move on transition, percent chance Andres Arroyo makes the final. You know what? Not even make the final. Well, okay, if he makes the final, he'll be an All-American. So percent chance he makes the final / becomes an All-American.
Oh, man.
I've got a number ready. 40? Okay. Fox?
25. 25.
I was gonna give it a 30. I was gonna give it a 30. All right. I mean, okay.
Wow.
I know.
I'm surprised you give him a chance at all,
I know.
man.
Well, it's like I learned about an economic concept recently where it's like eventually they have to learn and they will eventually do the right thing. This is try number 6 or 7, I think. So I'm applying this economic concept to track and field. I'm hopefully right this time. We'll see what happens. So sorry, Fox. That's all I got.
Yes. Economics and track, a match made in heaven. So we've been talking all night about, teams bunching up in the events with Virginia Tech in the 800, Ole Miss in the 800. And I mentioned earlier that I really like the idea of having a 3K. Caleb, you said you don't think Ben Sorrell even toes the line, but how do you feel about John Dressel and Joe Klecker in that race?
I think they're two young guys that are going to pick up a ton of really valuable experience. I don't see them contending in that top 3 or 4 this year. Just Eric Peterson, Morgan McDonald, Justin Knight, Cheswick, obviously Gilbert. There's just too many names that are, I think, on a little different level than they are right now. But 2 sophomores, this is going to be huge experience for them. And I think Klecker's All-American. I think Dressel gets hurt a little bit coming back from that 5K. But I like the idea of them racing together. I think I could be wrong. I think the roommates, that's great. That's the type of thing that really helps in these races. You have a good friend, someone you train with all year long, at your side, working with him. That's huge. That helps more than people realize sometimes, I think. I was fortunate to be a teammate with Emily Orn the first 3 years of my college career. She was a 9-time Division II national champion. But you talk to her, having teammates in those last races, the 3Ks at the end of national meets, was huge. That's what got her through that and got her the national titles in those events too, if you talk to her. I think that is a big thing for these Colorado guys. I just think talent-wise, they're a little outside that top 4. So I wouldn't expect them to be mixing it up for the win. But I think expect a big performance out of Klecker. I think 5th or 6th for him isn't out of the question, and I think they're both going to be really, really good outdoors and then moving forward next year.
Yeah, maybe one day when this podcast blows up, we're going to get Eric Jenkins and we'll ask him about racing with a teammate.
Yeah.
Now, Garrett, do you think there's any chance that Sorrell comes back? If he does, can they all run together and strategize?
I will never doubt Colorado. I never will ever doubt them. Do I think they could have all 3 guys be All-American? Yes, I think they could. Do I think it'll happen? No. And a lot of the reasons that Caleb pointed out. You look at Sorrell coming off that mile. If the mile is tactical and it gets slow, and maybe the 3K gets slow and tactical as well. Maybe Sorrell has a chance to be All-American in both, and I'm not putting that out there. How is that actually going to happen? I don't know. If I like those chances of both becoming super tactical like that, enough to give Sorrell a chance to become an All-American. John Dressel, he's still a young guy, very, very talented. Should be in the discussion for the 5K, but that 5K I think is going to take a little bit out of him. The only one who I'm giving a lock to become All-American is Joe Klecker. Joe Klecker just shown incredible consistency. He's been winning. He's running fast times, and he's running races very poised. He's putting away races in the last lap. So I like where he's going. I think these guys could all be All-Americans in the right race that plays out, but it'd have to be a really, really race that benefits all of them somehow together. So I'm going to say Klecker gets it. Sorrell does if it's tactical, and Dressel will not get it. That's what we're going with.
Yeah, originally when I was thinking about this question, I was like, yeah, I really like this team, but I'm looking at this list. Like, Brian Barraza is going to be fresh. I really like him. Clayton Young, going to be fresh. Really like him. Justin Knight's going to be a lock for All-American fresh. They are really, really like to be, 3rd to 6th in both the 3K and the 5K, just because I like how he runs. He reminds me a lot of Luis Vargas, which is something I've said earlier. So do I really think that there's enough room for Klecker, Dressel, and Sorrell to be in here? And it's just like, well, I guess not. like Morgan McDonald is going to be an All-American running fresh, and obviously you have Ches, and I really like Colby Gilbert. And there's not enough space. There's just not, So originally I thought, you would have 4 fresh Colorado Buffalo. I guess Zach Perrin missed the cutoff, and I did not expect Ben Sorrell to go for the mile. And if that had been the case, I thought they could have just packed it up right in the middle and just taken, 3 through 7 somehow, no matter the order. But now it's just I don't know. For some reason, the difference between 3 and 4 for me is very dramatic. So yeah, I guess I'm guessing with you guys. I'm not as high as Colorado really dominating this race as I was even an hour ago. But yeah, I mean, Klecker has certainly been the breakout athlete this indoor season, I'd say. He's been just tremendous winning races and looking just fantastic doing it. Who do you think could be that guy for outdoor? Who would break out, or who's going to recover?
So I've got a few guys. I think I really, I think it's a given. But when Henry Wynn was injured, he had some difficulties during cross country. We don't really know what it was specifically, but I think he's got to be the guy that just simply needed more time to rebound, to recover. He's a national champion in the indoor mile and didn't make it this year. So he's just clearly not on top of his game. I think you got to guarantee that he's going to be someone that will be able to bounce back and should make nationals. Of course, we said that about this year, but I like Henry Wynn to bounce back. And at the same time, I also think that who am I completely even missing here? Kyle Mao. I mentioned him earlier, Indiana. He's been winning races. Didn't break 4, but he was at 4 flat. I really like what he's doing. So Kyle Mao, watch out for him. Freshman that's got a lot of talent.
Now, Caleb, you are really, really good at these. You called Josh Kerr when nobody else was talking about him, so I have very high expectations.
Man.
Who do you think is going to be the star of outdoor?
I didn't see a name like Josh Kerr that really impressed me. That missed nationals, coming out of nowhere. Obviously, like Garrett said, Henry Wynn. I think we can expect big things from him. If I had to give you a name that you probably haven't heard before, but you should know, it's Alex Short from San Francisco. And he did qualify indoors. He's in that 5K field, 13:47. But he had a really, really solid cross season. He's putting together a really nice indoor season. I think he keeps progressing and improving outdoors. I think he's a name to watch. And then I have one other one. Who was it? Shoot. I'll get back to you on that one. I'm blanking. Sorry.
Well, I'm sure they're both fantastic picks. We're getting kicked out of our room, so I'll just give you mine really fast. I think somebody who's always on the cusp but never in that elite conversation is Robert Ford out of USC. He's always running 148 and never qualifying for nationals. This is the season he does it outside. I look for him to be an All-American. Something's got to give with him, and this is the time it happens. So, like I said, we're getting kicked out of our room. This has been the first episode officially of Full Speed Ahead. We hope to.
Real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Abraham Alvarado, 800 BYU, D2 transfer. Dude's gonna blow up outdoors. Wait for it.
He could have a big race. He's in that 800 inside. He's a very good runner. Okay, back to the closing. So we're going to try to do this a little more consistently. Hopefully we get a good conversation post NCAAs. Hopefully we can expand to maybe pros in high school after indoor nationals for them and USA championships for the pros. But until next time, I've got a paper to write, and I just got an email about Girl Scout cookies, so I've got a big night ahead of me. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.